Hey everybody, it's Connor from the Steel Lodge, and today we're checking out what I think is one of the best games you can possibly play on your Steam Deck, and that is Persona 5 Royal. Right here we got it running, and this game runs great on the Steam Deck. We'll dive more into the performance later, but you're in for a good time. Smooth 60 FPS, and if you want to get better battery life, you can log it down to 40, and you'll get a good couple hours on this one here. Now, I've beaten Persona 5, but just the original release back on the PS4. I've dabbled with Royal with the PS4 release as well, but it's really nice that it came to PC, Xbox, and PS5 with improved visuals, with resolution, and better frame rate as well. On the PC, you can go up to 120 FPS and 4K resolutions, or even higher, because there's a resolution slider there as well. Now in this video, I'll be breaking down why Persona 5 Royal is such a special game and why everybody should check this one out, even if you don't really like JRPGs. This game's very unique, and it has some of the best music you've ever heard in a video game. I'll have some of the soundtrack playing in the background of this video. The game is incredibly stylish and has a very strong art direction and visuals. This game's actually originally from the PS3 era, but it still holds up so well today because of the strong art direction here. So let's jump into the breakdown of why this game's so special and why you should definitely play it on the Steam Deck. The first thing you should know about Persona 5 is that there's really two parts to the game. In one half of the game, you'll be in the real world, exploring the city, going to school, making friends, and doing activities to increase your social skills, which are essentially your stat points in the game. And these can do things like let you make friends with new people, or progress your friendships further down the line, or even pass little quirky skill checks that are in the game. Now the other half of the gameplay takes place in people's subconscious and in a realm known as Mementos. Here you'll be doing a lot of dungeon crawling and turn-based combat. The combat here functions kind of like Pokemon, where demons or personas have their own weaknesses, and you want to target those weaknesses to knock them down. And if you're able to knock down all the enemy team, you'll be able to do a super attack called the all-out attack, or you can even do things like recruit enemies or ask them for items. Now, Persona 5 Royal has a ton of really interesting mechanics, and one very interesting one for the turn-based combat side of things is that when you collect personas, you can actually fuse them together into stronger personas, and you'll be doing this a lot throughout the game, and there's even some special fusions with multiple personas that can make special creatures. I find this gameplay split to be very refreshing because sometimes you'll want to go into a castle or a dungeon and do a bunch of combat on a day, get in a bunch of new personas and make your character stronger, or maybe you just want to spend some time exploring the open world and going around talking to characters, going to school and upgrading your stats, really preparing for the dungeon. You'll definitely want to spend a lot of time preparing for these dungeons and taking them down because you do have a limited amount of days in this game and you want to use all of them optimally. Now the gameplay you see here today is from the first few hours of the game because I don't really want to spoil anything later on. There's a bunch of really cool locations and characters that you'll meet. But for here, the first few hours are rather linear compared to the rest of the game. Once you get a few hours in and beat the first palace, the game really opens up a lot and you get into the main gameplay loop. The main gameplay loop is structured like this. You'll find a new target and then spend some time in the real world trying to find some information about them to infiltrate their palace. Once you actually can get into their palace, you'll do a bit of reconnaissance with your team, and then usually you get a new character that you can add to your party. Your party will grow quite large, and there's a ton of really good characters here. Once your team's reconnaissance is finished, you'll generally have 30 days to complete your goal inside of the palace, and you'll want to spend as few days as possible inside the palace, doing as much as you can. There are certain things like your health or SP that will limit you. SP is essentially your magic meter. It allows you to use personas, and they give you very powerful moves, which can target the weaknesses of enemies or heal your party. Now, as I mentioned, you'll definitely want to be efficient and spend as much time in one day in the palace as you can before it kicks you out. Generally, you want to play through until it literally forces you to leave the palace, because you want to use all these extra days that you have to progress your stats in the real world or build things and progress your relationships with other characters in the game. There are a ton of mechanics in Persona 5, and the game really just keeps opening up more and more as you progress through the game. You'll get certain characters very late in the game that open up a whole new variety of things you can do, which is pretty surprising and helps keep the gameplay very fresh and enjoyable throughout the entire runtime of the game. Now this game is extremely long, coming in around 100 to 150 hours, depending on how much of a completionist you want to be. If you just want to go on easy mode and just blast through the main story, you could probably get through it much faster, but this is a game that it even tells you, take your time, really just enjoy this one, and that's why the Steam Deck is such a perfect platform for this game. Being able to hit little sessions of this game here and there, and just play it over a very long period of time, I think is the right way to do this one. On my initial playthrough of Persona 5, I actually played the game over a year and a half or even longer on my PS4. It wasn't the Royal version, and the Royal version is definitely the improved version of the game, adding a few new characters, mechanics, and more areas to explore, and improving things like mementos and combat. So Royal is definitely the good version to have here on the Steam Deck and PC. Now before we get over to performance here on the Steam Deck, I want to cover a few of my favorite things about this game and what makes me really love it. One of the number one things is that I just love spending time in this world. All the mechanics here are really enjoyable, and I think the characters are extremely well written. There's something very rewarding about spending your time carefully and planning out how you want to tackle objectives and get your social stats up with characters in the optimal way. So maybe on a rainy day you spend it studying because you get more stats for your intelligence. Well, on certain days, there's a special burger challenge, and if you want to take that burger challenge on, you can do it for free essentially and get more stats towards your guts. So knowing little things like this and optimizing your play is extremely rewarding, and it will actually reward you greatly in the game too by progressing your relationships with these characters. The relationships with characters is definitely one of the other things I love about this game. It's really cool how they tie so many gameplay mechanics in with other characters, so as you move along your friendship with them, sometimes they just get better at combat or let you get stronger persona fusions, but other times they'll do things like save you a ton of time by doing your laundry for you, or giving you better medicine, teaching you how to make better curry so you can take it into Mementos and get a ton of SP back in there so you don't have to leave Mementos as frequently, or people's subconscious in the dungeon crawling sections of the game. Initially, during the first few hours of the game, the gameplay mechanics might seem kind of small, but by the end of the game, they grow into this massive gameplay system, and it's just all this masterfully done gameplay loop where you want to use all the gameplay systems presented to you in the optimal way, and it's very rewarding. Talking about relationships with characters, you can romance characters in this game. There's quite a few you can pick from, but be careful. You can romance several at the same time, but during certain times of the game, this will come back to bite you, so be careful about that. For me, I think Makoto is the best girl here. I really like her character a lot, but this time I'm going to mix it up and go with somebody different to keep things fresh. I know a lot of people will really like this aspect of the game, and just keep in mind this game has a ton of dialogue and almost all of it is voice acted, which is really nice, and the voice acting for both the English and Japanese side here is top notch. Another thing I really love about this game is just the monsters and the combat. Now, I never had played a Shin Megami Tensei game before Persona 5 here, but Persona is actually originally a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei. Now, those games have basically the same monsters that you see here in Persona. If you've played SMT5 on the Nintendo Switch, you've probably seen a lot of the monsters you've seen here in Persona, but I think that's fine. It's kind of like Pokemon, where you have the same Pokemon throughout different generations and different consoles. Now, another really enjoyable thing about this game is that the monsters have a wide variety of designs, and this game is definitely rated M. There's some very phallic-looking monsters, for instance. I think SMT5 is also rated M because they have some of these same monsters, and some of them are definitely not meant for younger audiences. Early on in the game, it's usually pretty basic stuff like imps and pixies, but later on, you'll get a lot of monsters inspired by Japanese folklore or other deities from different religions and ancient religions and things like that. A nice thing about Persona 5 also, when it comes to combat, is that things move pretty quickly here. Some people don't like turn-based combat systems because they find they move too slowly. I personally love turn-based combat, and I think this is one of the best turn-based combat systems ever created. Being able to hit people's weaknesses and then knock them down for all-out attacks, or negotiating with them, is so stylish, and it's just really rewarding that you have different ways to get through combat scenarios. For instance, if you're strapped for cash and really need to buy something in the real world, you'll definitely want to knock down personas and then demand money from them. But on the other hand, if you're underleveled, you might just want to go through and do a bunch of all-out attacks, kill as many personas as you can, as quickly as possible to level up, so you can fight the boss at the end of the level with some higher stats. Now, the final thing I want to mention here about what I love about this game is the presentation and the soundtrack. I think Persona 5 is probably the most stylish game I've ever played. The cut-ins during combat, the phone texting, just everything syncs together so well and provides a seamless experience. A lot of this game is spent in dialogue sections, and characters have nice animated portraits, and there's also full-blown anime cutscenes here. This is the first Persona game I had played, but as far as I understand it, this one takes a lot of the soundtracks from the older games and maybe remixes them or just uses them as is. Still, there are a good number of original tracks here, and the overall track list is huge, over like 150 songs, and almost every song on there is amazing to listen to. There's great vocal performances, and a lot of them I listen to while I'm working because they're great background music. Alright, now for the final section, the performance here on the Steam Deck. Now this game's running here maxed out on my Steam Deck, and I'm getting about 3 hours of battery life at a 68% charge. Mind you, this is going to a remote screen. I'm very satisfied with the performance here. We're usually using around 50 to 60% of the GPU to hit maxed out 720p performance, and that is with a smooth 60 FPS as well. Now, I actually recently traveled back from Europe for work, and for that I went ahead and locked the game down to 40 FPS so I could play for as long as possible and got around 3 to 4 hours out of it there. I think that's definitely a very good amount of time to play this game, which still looks amazing on the Steam Deck. Now all the gameplay capture here is being rendered at 720p, so the UI might look a little bit fuzzy, but on the Steam Deck's smaller screen, it looks a lot better than you see here. That's about gonna wrap it up here though, guys. Persona 5 Royal is in my top 5 games of all time. I seriously really love this game, and I was honestly just blown away the first time I played Persona 5, the original release on the PS4. I haven't really beat a lot of JRPGs before that point. I would get into them, but just kind of drop them. But this one just had me so gripped the whole way through. The presentation, the characters, the writing, the combat, everything about this game is masterclass, and the Metacritic score for this game definitely reflects the universal praise it has from people that don't even like JRPGs too. The Steam Deck is the absolute perfect platform I could think of for this game. Being able to play in sessions where you can get through maybe a day or two in-game and then put the game back down is perfect, and this one you definitely want to play over a long period of time since it's such a long game. Enjoy this one and definitely pick it up for the Steam Deck. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. But other than that, have a good one everybody, and talk to you later.